Hello, and welcome to my channel. I'm Puddles, and today we're gonna do some Evocation dungeon walkthrough. So next level of the mega dungeon was Evocation. So let me just get here. So let's have a look at some Evocation spells. Mostly damagey, explodey things. Fireball, lightning bolt, shatter, all of those brilliant things. And like a couple of shields and resilient spheres and all the walls. So many walls. Wall of force, wall of light, wall of stone. Yeah, lots of cool things to work with. It is literally just exploding things most of the time, or empowering things to explode. So I use that. I didn't really brainstorm very much for this dungeon. I will go to my brainstorm here. You can see over channel trap, which is the evocation thing where you can just do more damage each time, but I didn't do that. Explosion encounter where bad guys don't take any damage, which is what the evokers can do. Resilient fear encounter or trap, elemental water based trap or puzzle, didn't do that. Boop. And a wall puzzle, but it wasn't really a puzzle. But I suppose with this one, the best thing to do is to just walk you guys through it. I had a couple of cool little puzzles, and there was sort of there was a like theme, I suppose, to the dungeon, which worked out exactly how I thought or how I wanted it to. My players have already run through this one, so I can tell you how it went. As opposed to some of the other walkthroughs where they haven't. As you can see, there were death saves. 2 players died in this, but that was mostly due to their own doing, and I didn't feel too bad about it. Once this loads, my goodness. So basically, the theme of this was you can use your strength to get through a lot of these puzzles. You can just brute force your way through it, but it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt a lot. And if you want to use your wit and take the time to disable traps or figure out what the puzzles are instead of just rushing in, you will take less damage and it will be okay. And I sort of introduced that with... Oh, I'm already on this map. I introduced that with the guy. So here are my players. This is where they started. I'll zoom out so you can see the whole map. So this is the whole map. It's quite colorful. Lots going on. But first, the players walk in, and standing in front of them is this guy here, Eltan Chon. He is the dwarvish evoker master. He basically tells the party that everything up till now has been a piece of cake. That all of the other wizards who built all the other levels they're not really challenging them. And he's not going to do that. He's given them a time limit. He says, lots of people die in here. If you don't use your brain, you're gonna die. And then he leaves them with, this place is going to test your wits and your strength, but use your wits more than your strength. And then he walks behind this wall, and here are different walls. So there's like a wall of water, wall of fire, wall of sand, wall of ice, wall of stone, and then a force wall. And basically the goal for the players is to disable all these walls however they can, and come to Eltan and have a little chat at the end. So I didn't make it like all of these walls except for the force wall can be dispelled, and we did have a bard who had an item that could dispel things but also spells. So they could have dispelled 5 of the walls using spells, but that would have just burnt through all of their like resources. So they did dispel a couple of them, and then the barbarian, doing exactly what I thought he was going to do, destroyed the ice wall. He ran through the firewall, took a bunch of damage, hit the ice wall, took some more damage, and yeah, basically it was there to give them a goal, like something to do, but also I knew that they were going to do what they did. And to blow through some resources. As they walk down this hallway, there are 2 Big B's hands, and they are just doing rock, scissors, paper. As the players stand in this square here, they both stop, and it was basically a rock paper, scissors match. And I did it randomly. It was like a D6. Let's have a look. Evocation spells. I had like a page for all of my traps and stuff. But there was character sheet. That is what I want. Here. So I would roll a d6. 1 and 2 was rock, 3, 4 scissors, 5, 6 paper, and then I just got the player to declare. If they lost, the hands would attack, swinging at them. But if they won 3 times, a chest would appear, and inside the chest was a stone, which they could cast a spell into and use the contingency spell. I'm not going to go too into detail with that. It was just a bit of loot. Next, they walked, and there is this whirlpool. In the middle is a... you can't really see it, but there it is. In the middle is a button, and it will disable one of the walls. And on the outside are all these clear spheres. The players don't know anything about them. They tried to move them, tried to touch them. Nothing happened. And they knew that they could, if they wanted to, just run into the center, or push the button and then leave, but they would take damage from it. And they knew if they got too close to this that they would get sucked in. I suppose before we go too far ahead, let's just talk about the main thing. So here is a rod. So this was where the players needed to get to, this rod here. This rod, as you can see, there are colored globes, there are clear globes. Everywhere there are globes. I have a little puzzle here, little globes everywhere. This rod can activate these globes. So these players can go to all of these different places and do all of these puzzles without this rod and take a bunch of damage and die. Or they can choose to move past these puzzles, fight this encounter, get the rod, and then they can do all of these puzzles the right way. But they didn't do that. They basically did it a hard way. So basically, once you have the rod, all you have to do is color all of these orbs, and this will stop. But they didn't do that. They charged in and pushed the button. Then in this room is this puzzle here. So if any of the players touch any of the colored orbs, they take damage. If they touch the clear orb, nothing happens. But with the rod, they can change colors. So if they have the red rod and they touch it to red, it turns the red clear. You can see it here. I'll just hover over it. I'm not going to go through how it works, but basically when they touch the rod, there are 3 buttons on the rod. If they touch blue button and then touch the blue orb, certain things will happen. And this puzzle here is to get them all the same color. And then that would, again, disable one of the walls. Which worked out pretty well. Obviously, they tried to figure out what was going on. This is one of the puzzles that they literally can't do until they have the rod. So they fumbled around with it, took some damage, and then decided to leave it till later. Then we have here, a walking puzzle. So each of these symbols, as you can see over here, each of them represents a number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And each of the numbers represent a direction. And you can see the pink is the correct path. So if they walk on the correct path and go all the way to the end and push the button, they're fine. The players figured out that they were numbers. They were sort of thinking of jumping like 1, then jumping to 2, then 3. So one of the players jumped to 1. He took some damage. Basically, every time you jump on a square that's not the correct one, a magic missile will shoot and hit you. But that gets... So you get a first level at the first time you screw up, then there'll be a second level magic missile the next time you screw up, so on and so forth. I also had... on the walls, there were hints. So up here, there was a 7 saying that this direction was... So up was the 7, then this way was the 1, and then this way was the 5. The players didn't really take much time to figure it out. They spent like a couple of minutes, if that, trying to think about it and testing stuff, and then true to form, the barbarian ran across and he misty stepped across. And I knew that someone might do this, so I had that if they do it, they take 30 d4 damage. But I changed that. I just said every square. So there were 54 squares here. So he took 54 d4 damage. He took like 137 damage or something like that. But he was raging and it was halved, so he didn't die. But yeah, so he pushed the button. It worked, but he took a buttload of damage. Instead of just trying to figure out this puzzle, they rushed it and took damage, which was, again, the theme of this dungeon. This room, there's like darkness. If the players walk into it, it's maddening darkness, the spell. They take 8d6 psychic damage. In this room is a button, which I've just moved, apparently. Another button. But all they need to do is light up these two orbs and the darkness will disappear. But obviously, the first time they came to this room, they didn't realize that there was a rod that could do that to these orbs. So they smartly decided to come back to the room. Next, I had a couple of arrows. Each were glowing. Grabbing them, if they touched the arrows, the players would take 3d8 damage from like fire, cold, acid. I just randomized it as I went. But it was basically an item, I called it a chromatic arrow. It does the chromatic orb spell. But if the players had have got the rod first and just touched the rod to the arrows, it would have disabled the energy that was swirling around them and they wouldn't have taken the damage. But they grabbed all 6 arrows, took 6 times 3d8 damage. And yeah, pretty sure they used all the arrows in the fight as well. That was a pretty simple, easy thing for them to do. Again, they didn't realize that there was a rod that they needed. And I didn't really allude that there was a rod. I didn't tell them until later on. So maybe in future times they run this dungeon, maybe I will give them a little hint saying that there is a rod that can trigger these orbs as opposed to just having them fumble around. But it all worked out. Something for me to think about in the future. Down this way we have some bagpipes. One of the players, he was a bard, and I put a really nice item in here. These are 4 orbs, and then these are force fields that they can't get through. They had no idea how to open them until they had the rod, obviously, but basically it's like the other puzzles. They just have to have each of the orbs a color. But they didn't really do that. And then, yeah, I have this encounter. So, because the guy at the Eltan, the wizard, he is a dwarf, I just had a bunch of dwarves. So I've got these 2 guys here. One is a reflavored gladiator, and one is a hobgoblin captain reflavored. So those are the big bad guys. And they have, one of them has fire armor, which is a spell from the Evocation spell. So every time they take damage, whoever hit them takes damage as well. And the other one has the same spell, but it's cold. And then we have these 3 guys. So the yellow guys are in the resilient sphere. So they are immune to everything. They can't be hurt unless someone casts like a level 6 spell or something like that, which I don't think any of my players had access to. So these guys are immune. You can't even hurt them. And then in front of them are like these cannons. They don't really look like it, but basically these guys can trigger the cannons by rolling into them, and they just cast evocation spells. So lightning bolt, fireball, melts acid arrow. I had one cast cone of cold. I had one cast chain lightning, and it was a really tough encounter considering the level of the players and what they were fighting. They took a lot of damage. It looked pretty grim there for a minute, but they got through it. And I also had a little social thing where they were talking to these guys and they mentioned the rod, which maybe been a bit late because this was the second last thing they did. But that was a pretty fun encounter. And then obviously the players get the rod, and they figured out that the 3 buttons correlate with different colors. And then they just went around the rest of the dungeon trying to figure out how to open everything, and the things that they hadn't just charged through, they managed to do. So they were, and this was also, I gave them a 2-hour time limit, so they could only take 1 short rest during this whole time, which they did. And then they went to Eltan, and he so they've triggered all of the traps. They've done everything. They've pushed all the buttons, and all of the walls were down. So they went to him. They were all bloodied and broken, and I told them that Eltan can, or he through his character, he said that they've done well. They've made it through. Probably not the right way. They could have done it a lot smarter. But if they want, they can leave, and they will get out of here alive. Or if they're willing to fight him, he will give them an item of magical powers if they win. Which they made a vote, and 4 of the players wanted to continue and 1 didn't. Which was funny, but yeah, this guy's a badass. He has legendary actions. He has all sorts of things. It was another thing where it's like, well, if you use your brains and your wit and say no to the fight, then you will get out of here alive. Or if you try to force your way through strength, you're going to take a lot of damage and maybe die, which some of them did. So I gave him like lots of armor, lots of hit points because it's 5 of him. I gave him warding wind, which was like difficult terrain for people that are close to him, and disadvantage on ranged attacks. And then I had evoke the Evoker's Orb, which was his legendary action. So he had 3 legendary action points, and he could spend them casting spells from the orbs. But if one of the players wanted to, they could disable the orbs with the rod, which one of the players did do in the fight. And then I said he had legendary resistance, but he would have to sacrifice 4 orbs to automatically succeed on a failed save, and then he would only have 1 legendary point, because I thought maybe the bard would banish him or something like that. So I just had that there just in case. He had Crown of Stars. He was shooting fireballs everywhere. It was a pretty fun fight. Two of the characters died, but you know, they're the ones who decided that they wanted the fight in the first place, so it was fine. And yeah, the 3 surviving members got a cool sword, and they're ready for the next dungeon. So yeah, this is the Evocation dungeon. It didn't really have that much. It's like just puzzles and stuff and exploding and traps, and but it was probably one of the funnest dungeons to run. I'm not gonna lie. The players just bumbling through and hurting themselves was funny to, at least for a DM's perspective. It was pretty fun, and I think pretty sure my players had a lot of fun too. But yeah, that's the Evocation level of this mega dungeon. And yeah, I hope if you want to steal any puzzles or anything, go for it. Or yeah, you could steal the whole dungeon itself if you like, and run it yourself. But yeah, hope you enjoyed.